The grand hall of the Zereth Dominion stretched endlessly, its towering pillars glowing with soft, golden light. It was the heart of the galaxy's most powerful empire, a place where rulers and conquerors gathered. Today, however, it held an even greater purpose. The grand selection had begun. For the first time in 1,000 years, Queen Siliara of the Zereth Dominion would choose a consort. The one she selected would not only rule beside her, but also shape the future of the empire itself. This was no ordinary decision. It was a declaration of power. The galaxy had sent its best. Mighty warriors, legendary tacticians, and intellectuals beyond compare stood in the hall, their appearances as varied as the stars. Some had shimmering scales, others had hardened exoskeletons, and a few floated in the air with psychic energy pulsing around them. Each believed they were the rightful choice, destined to stand beside the queen. And then there was Ethan Voss, a human. He was the only one from Earth, standing alone in the sea of alien superiority. The Dominion had not invited humanity. They had allowed them to send a representative, more as a joke than anything else. No one expected a mere human to survive even the first trial. Ethan knew this. He could feel the amused glances, the quiet laughter, the dismissive looks from towering reptilian warriors and cold-blooded strategists. But he did not flinch. He adjusted his military jacket, his sharp blue eyes scanning the competition. He wasn't here to win. He was here to prove that humanity deserved a seat at the table. A deep gong sounded, silencing the whispers. From the grand entrance, Queen Siliara appeared. She was breathtaking, even by human standards. Tall and regal, with silver skin that shimmered like liquid metal and deep violet eyes that held the weight of 1,000 years, she commanded attention with every step. She wore a ceremonial robe of midnight blue, lined with golden symbols of her ancestors. The room bowed, except for Ethan. He didn't kneel, not out of disrespect, but because humans bowed only to those they served. And he served no one. Siliara's gaze flickered toward him, a moment of curiosity flashing across her face before she addressed the assembly. You have all come to prove yourselves worthy. But strength alone is not enough. A ruler's partner must possess wisdom, courage, and the ability to command respect. Only the most worthy shall remain. Her voice echoed through the chamber, and as soon as she finished, the first trial began. Trial of the mind. The contenders were led into an enormous arena where floating metallic drones filled the air, their surfaces shifting and flickering. A voice echoed through the space. You have 5 minutes. Decode the pattern and deactivate the drones, or be eliminated. Ethan barely had time to process the instructions before the drones attacked. Blades shot out from their sides, energy pulses fired at random, and the competitors scattered. Some used brute strength, smashing drones with their massive fists. Others used telekinesis to push them away. Ethan dodged an energy blast, rolling behind a fallen pillar. His mind worked fast. This wasn't just about fighting. It was a test of problem-solving. He studied the drones, noticing their lights flickered in a repeating sequence: red, blue, green, yellow. A pattern. While others wasted energy trying to destroy them, Ethan moved to the control panel on the far wall. He tapped into the system, searching for a way to manipulate the sequence. The drones shifted. They were linked, their movements connected by a single source. If he could disrupt that. Got it. Ethan quickly reversed the color pattern, hitting the controls in sequence. The drones froze for a split second, then collapsed to the ground, deactivated. Silence filled the arena. Then a robotic voice announced, "Trial completed. Winner, Ethan Voss." The aliens stared in shock. Ethan had solved it without fighting. Siliara's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Trial of strength. The next test was more direct. The contenders were placed inside an anti-gravity chamber and forced to engage in combat while floating weightlessly. Strength alone would not be enough. Balance, adaptability, and control were key. Ethan watched as his opponents charged at one another, grappling wildly in the air. He knew he couldn't win in sheer brute force, but he didn't need to. Instead of fighting head-on, he used quick, controlled movements, pushing off surfaces to redirect attacks. When a monstrous, six-armed warrior lunged at him, Ethan twisted midair, using the alien's own momentum to send him crashing into another. One by one, he outmaneuvered them. When the trial ended, only 4 contenders remained, including him. Whispers in the hall. As the competitors left the arena, the watching audience was murmuring. A human had survived the first 2 trials. Impossible. Ethan ignored the whispers, but he knew what they meant. The galaxy's greatest warriors had dismissed humanity as insignificant for centuries, but now they were forced to see him as a threat. And Queen Ciliera, she was watching him now with true interest. The trials were not over, but Ethan had done what no human before him had. He had earned their attention, and he had no intention of stopping there. The great arena was filled with whispers. The impossible had happened. A human had passed the first 2 trials. The elite warriors of the galaxy, beings of immense power and intelligence, had expected Ethan Voss to fail quickly. Instead, he had outmaneuvered them, proving that humanity was not as weak as they believed. Ethan stood near the edge of the arena, arms crossed, studying his remaining opponents. 3 alien contenders had also survived. General Zalzor, a massive 4-armed warlord from the Draken Empire, covered in thick, armored scales. His people were known for brute strength and unmatched combat skills. Vereshnikai, a pale-skinned telepath from the Myron Collective. His kind could read thoughts and manipulate emotions, making them deadly strategists. Sarakai, a sleek, feline-like warrior from the Aetherian clans, known for her extreme speed and agility. And then there was Ethan Voss, the outsider, the underdog. At the far end of the arena, Queen Ciliera observed them with quiet interest. The last trials would soon begin, and the entire galaxy was watching. Trial of Honor. The floor of the arena shifted, revealing an ancient battleground, complete with ruins and broken statues of past rulers. A deep voice echoed through the chamber. A true leader is not just a warrior, but a protector. Your task, save the innocent. At that moment, holographic figures appeared throughout the ruins, representing civilians, wounded soldiers, and frightened children. Some were trapped under debris, while others were exposed to simulated enemy fire. The challenge was clear. Would they focus on winning or on saving lives? The test had begun. Zalzor roared, charging forward. He smashed through obstacles, lifting fallen beams with his immense strength. He worked fast, rescuing those in danger, but his focus remained on finishing first rather than protecting every life. Vereshnikai moved methodically, using his psychic abilities to calm the panicked civilians, making them easier to guide to safety. Sarakai darted from place to place at lightning speed, saving many in seconds, but she was moving too quickly to ensure their full safety. And Ethan, he did something different. Instead of rushing, he organized the civilians. He gathered the stronger ones to help move debris, instructed the able-bodied to carry the wounded, and set up a defensive position in case of further attacks. The other competitors worked alone. Ethan built a team. By the end of the trial, the simulated civilians stood together, safe and united under Ethan's leadership. The trial concluded. The voice announced. Most civilians saved. Ethan Voss. Once again, the arena fell silent. A human had beaten the finest warriors of the galaxy. Again, Trial of Dominion. Now, only 2 trials remained. A new test began. The Trial of Dominion, a challenge of leadership. The contenders were each given control of a simulated fleet with one mission: conquer or protect a strategically important planet. The simulation started, and immediately, the different strategies became clear. Zalzor took the most direct approach, sending his fleet to crush the enemy in a full-scale battle. His brute force strategy was effective but costly. Vereshnikai used mind games. His ships manipulated the enemy into making mistakes, luring them into traps. Sarakai relied on hit-and-run tactics, striking fast before disappearing, wearing down her enemies over time. And Ethan, he didn't attack at all, at first. Instead, he negotiated. Rather than wasting ships in war, he sent diplomats to weaken the enemy's alliances, spread misinformation, and turn former enemies into allies. By the time he moved his fleet, the battle was already won. The enemy forces had fractured from within. The simulation ended. The final result. Victor, Ethan Voss. Gasps rippled through the hall. The human had won again. Not by force, but by strategy. The final challenge. Now, only one trial remained. Queen Ciliara stepped forward, her violet eyes scanning the competitors. "The last trial is simple," she said. "It is the trial of will." She raised a single hand, and suddenly, everything changed. A powerful psychic force filled the chamber. The contenders collapsed to their knees, gripping their heads in pain. The force wasn't physical. It was mental. Doubt, fear, regret. Each warrior was forced to face their greatest weakness, their deepest fear. Tzalzor trembled as he saw his empire burning, his people calling him a failure. Vereshnikai gasped, trapped in an endless void of silence, his telepathic powers useless. Sarakai curled into herself as she faced the loss of her speed, her greatest strength gone. And Ethan, his vision was different. He stood alone, earth in flames behind him. The faces of his fallen comrades haunted him. The voices of those who had doubted humanity echoed in his mind. "You don't belong here. You are weak. You will fail." The weight of isolation pressed against his soul. But Ethan did something no one expected. He stood up. Through sheer force of will, he pushed back against the psychic attack, his mind resisting the weight of doubt and fear. He had been through worse. He had fought against impossible odds before. And he would not break. A loud crack echoed through the arena as the psychic force shattered around him. The trial had ended. Queen Ciliara smiled. The results were clear. "Ethan Voss," she declared, "you have proven yourself beyond expectation." Silence. Then shock. Had the queen just chosen a human? The galaxy watched in awe. The great arena had never been so silent. The galaxy's greatest warriors, strategists, and leaders had fought fiercely for the honor of standing beside Queen Ciliara. But after all the trials, only one remained. A human. Ethan Voss. His body ached from the trials, his mind still recovering from the psychic assault. But he stood tall. His breathing was steady, his blue eyes sharp. He had faced doubt, fear, and enemies far beyond his strength. Yet, against all odds, he had won. The queen's voice echoed through the chamber, clear and unwavering. "Ethan Voss has proven himself worthy." A wave of shock swept across the grand hall. Gasps, whispers, and disbelief filled the air. The gathered nobles, warlords, and rulers of the galaxy could not comprehend what had just happened. A human had succeeded where kings and conquerors had failed. The uprising begins. Not everyone accepted the queen's decision. From the high balcony, a deep, growling voice interrupted the moment. "This is unacceptable." The speaker was Lord Threxus, a high-ranking noble of the Dominion, his reptilian form towering over the crowd. His golden armor gleamed under the lights, his sharp fangs bared in anger. "You cannot choose a human, Your Majesty," he spat. "They are weak. They are nothing compared to the great species of this empire." Other nobles murmured in agreement. The old ways were being challenged, and they did not like it. Ethan knew this moment would come. He could see the way the powerful figures of the Dominion glared at him, not as a leader, but as a threat to their rule. Queen Ciliara met Threxus's gaze, her expression calm but firm. "The trials are sacred," she said. "Ethan Voss earned his place. Or do you mean to challenge my rule?" A dangerous silence filled the air. Threxus hesitated, but then a wicked smile spread across his face. A challenge, then. Gasps rippled through the audience. The Queen's law was clear. If someone opposed her decision, they had the right to challenge the chosen consort. A duel. A fight to prove worth through combat. Ethan exhaled slowly. Of course, it had come to this. Very well, Queen Ciliara said. The challenge is accepted. The duel of honor. The arena floor shifted, forming a circular battleground. The crowd roared in excitement. Lord Threxus stepped forward, towering over Ethan. His scaled arms were thick with muscle, and his long, curved claws gleamed like blades. He was a warrior, a veteran of countless battles. Ethan, by comparison, looked almost fragile. He was smaller, lighter, and far less powerful. But he wasn't afraid. A loud gong rang out. The fight had begun. Threxus charged without hesitation, moving with shocking speed for his size. His claws slashed through the air, aiming to tear Ethan apart in a single strike. Ethan barely dodged, rolling to the side. He had no armor, no weapons, only his training and instincts. Threxus smirked. Run, human. That is all you can do. Ethan didn't answer. He studied his opponent. Threxus was strong, but predictable, relying on brute force to overwhelm his enemies. The reptilian warlord lunged again, his claws slicing downward. This time, Ethan moved differently. He didn't dodge. Instead, he stepped in close, too close for Threxus to use his full strength. Then, with precise movement, Ethan grabbed Threxus's wrist and used his own momentum against him, twisting his arm violently. A loud crack echoed through the arena. Threxus howled in pain. His right arm was dislocated. The crowd gasped. A human had just injured a Dominion warlord. Ethan didn't hesitate. He spun, using a powerful elbow strike to the side of Threxus's head, disorienting him. Then, before the warlord could recover, Ethan swept his legs out from under him, sending the massive alien crashing to the ground. Dust rose around them. Silence. Threxus tried to rise, but his injured arm gave out beneath him. He glared up at Ethan with fury, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Ethan did not attack again. He simply stood over Threxus, unshaken. The message was clear. Strength alone was not enough. Power without control was weakness. Queen Ciliara's voice rang out. Enough. The duel is decided. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, amazed at what they had witnessed. Others looked furious, their power slipping through their fingers. But no one could deny it now. Ethan Voss had won. The aftermath. Threxus was taken away by medics, his pride shattered. The nobles who had opposed Ethan remained silent, unwilling to challenge the Queen's judgment any further. Ethan turned to face Queen Ciliara. For the first time, she looked at him not just with interest, but with something deeper, respect. "You are full of surprises, Ethan Voss," she said. He smirked, wiping dust from his sleeve. Humans tend to be. The Queen turned to the gathered rulers of the Dominion. "Let it be known, Ethan Voss is my chosen consort. He has proven his worth in mind, in leadership, and in battle." Her voice became firm. "And if any still doubt him, let them challenge me next." No one spoke. The choice had been made. The galaxy had changed, and it had changed because of a human. The halls of the Celestial Palace were filled with whispers. The Queen's decision had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. A human had won. Ethan Voss walked through the grand corridors, flanked by 2 Aetherian guards. Their feline-like eyes studied him with curiosity, their sleek armor reflecting the golden light of the palace's towering chandeliers. Behind him, the grand doors of the great arena had shut. The duel against Lord Threxus was over. Ethan had won, but he knew that victory in the arena was just the beginning. The real challenge started now. As the Queen's chosen consort, he was no longer just a competitor. He was part of galactic politics, and there were many who wanted him gone. A dangerous invitation. The palace's vast throne room stretched before him. At its center, Queen Ciliara sat on a raised platform, her violet eyes fixed on Ethan. She was regal and unreadable, dressed in a flowing gown of midnight blue, her silver crown catching the light. Around her stood the High Council, the most powerful rulers of the Dominion. Some looked at Ethan with amusement, others with thinly veiled hostility. One of them, a tall blue-skinned alien with a golden headdress, stepped forward. Chancellor Vorin. His voice was smooth but cold. "Human," he said, drawing out the word like an insult. "You have won the Queen's favor, but that does not mean you have won our trust." Ethan gave him a small smile. "I wouldn't expect it to be that easy." A few chuckles echoed through the chamber, but Vorin's face remained emotionless. "There is an ancient custom in our dominion. A new consort must prove his wisdom, not just in battle, but in diplomacy." Asterisk, asterisk. Ethan's instincts sharpened. This was a trap. "Tomorrow, we invite you to the Gathering of Worlds," Vorin continued. "The leaders of the Dominion will be there, and you, human, will speak on behalf of the Queen." Ethan's eyes flicked to Queen Ciliara. She remained silent, watching him carefully. A test. A mistake could mean war. A wrong word could turn allies into enemies. But Ethan simply nodded. "I'll be there." Vorin smirked. "Then let us see if you truly belong." The Gathering of Worlds. The next day, Ethan entered the Hall of Concord, an enormous dome where leaders from across the Dominion gathered. Massive banners of different worlds hung from the ceiling, and holographic maps displayed shifting territories. The rulers, warlords, politicians, and trade magnates stood in a semicircle, all waiting for one thing: the human. Ethan took his place beside Queen Ciliara. Chancellor Vorin stood at the center. "We gather here to discuss the fate of the Dominion," he declared. "A war brews at our borders. The Draken Empire threatens our trade routes. Our fleets are stretched thin. Our people demand action." A massive horned alien warlord stepped forward. "We should strike first. Crush them before they become stronger." Another, a sleek Myran diplomat, shook his head. "If we fight, we risk too much. We should negotiate peace." The debate grew heated. Voices clashed. Tensions rose. Some demanded war. Others feared destruction. Then Vorin's gaze fell on Ethan. "Tell us, human," he said, his voice filled with hidden amusement. "What would you do?" Silence fell over the chamber. Ethan's mind worked fast. This was a test. If he sided with war, he could start a conflict. If he chose peace, he might seem weak. He took a breath. Then he spoke. "You're asking the wrong question." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ethan continued. "You're asking if you should fight or surrender. But the real question is, how do we win without losing?" Eyes narrowed, but they were listening now. Ethan pointed to the holographic map. "The Draken Empire is powerful, but they need resources. Their supply lines are vulnerable." He zoomed in on a sector near the border. "Instead of attacking directly, we cut them off. We deny them fuel, disrupt their trade. They will weaken from within." Some rulers exchanged glances. The idea had merit. Ethan stepped forward. "If they grow desperate, they'll negotiate on our terms. If they attack, they'll be weaker than before. Either way, we win." A deep silence followed. Then, a slow clap echoed through the hall. Queen Ciliara. She rose from her seat, her violet eyes shining with approval. "Well reasoned, Ethan Voss." Vorin's expression tightened. He had wanted Ethan to fail. Instead, the human had proven himself once again. The warlords nodded in agreement. Some still doubted him, but others had begun to respect him. Ethan Voss was no longer just the Queen's choice. He was becoming a force of his own. The shadows moved. As the meeting ended, Ethan felt a presence behind him. Sarakai, The feline warrior who had competed in the trials stepped beside him. "You made enemies today," she said quietly. Ethan smirked. "I've made a few friends too." She didn't smile back. Instead, she leaned in. "Be careful, human. Not all fights happen in the arena." Before he could ask what she meant, she disappeared into the crowd. Ethan exhaled. He had won the battle of words today. But somewhere in the shadows, new threats were already forming. The gathering of worlds had ended, but its impact was only beginning. Ethan Voss had proven himself once again, offering a strategy that impressed both warlords and diplomats. He had gained respect, but also dangerous enemies. Now, as he walked through the golden corridors of the Celestial Palace, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Sarakai's warning echoed in his mind. Not all fights happen in the arena. Ethan had faced physical battles, but politics, assassination, manipulation, that was a different war altogether. And it had already begun. A deadly message. As Ethan reached his quarters, the guards at his door stepped aside. The room was as grand as everything in the palace. Tall arched windows, a bed large enough for a king, and walls lined with soft, glowing lights. But something was off. A small silver dagger lay on his bed. Its blade was coated in a faint, dark liquid. Poison. A warning. A message. Someone wanted him to understand his place. Ethan didn't flinch. He picked up the dagger, inspecting it carefully. The craftsmanship was intricate, alien. A symbol. Ethan stepped forward and placed the poison dagger on the royal platform. "Someone left me a gift." The queen's eyes darkened. She picked up the blade, running her fingers along the silent fang's emblem. "They have moved faster than I expected." Ethan crossed his arms. "You knew this was coming." Ciliara nodded. "You are an outsider. You are human. There are those who will never accept you as my chosen consort." Her voice grew colder. "And some will stop at nothing to see you removed." Ethan wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed made it real. "So, what's the plan?" he asked. The queen's lips curved slightly. "You think like a warrior, but this is not a fight we can win with strength alone." She stood from her throne and stepped closer. "Tonight, there is a royal gathering. The most powerful nobles will be there." Her violet eyes locked onto his. "And so will your enemy." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You think the assassin will strike at the party?" "Perhaps." She tilted her head. "Or perhaps we will force their hand." Ethan smirked. "A trap, then." The queen nodded. Ethan liked this plan. If someone wanted him dead, they wouldn't get another chance. Because tonight, he would be ready. The Night of Shadows. The royal gathering was held in the Crystal Hall, a magnificent chamber with transparent walls that overlooked the stars. Floating orbs of light drifted through the air, casting a warm glow over the guests. Ethan walked beside Queen Ciliara, wearing a formal dark uniform given to him by the palace tailor. It was made of some kind of smooth, lightweight material that adjusted to his movements effortlessly. As they entered, all eyes turned to them. The whispers began. The human walks beside the queen. How long until he is replaced? Ethan ignored them. He scanned the room, looking for anything, or anyone, out of place. Then he saw him, a tall, cloaked figure near the back of the hall. The same serpent emblem embroidered on his sleeve. The assassin. The deadly dance. Ethan moved smoothly through the crowd, careful not to alert his target. The assassin was speaking with Chancellor Vorin, the very man who had tried to humiliate Ethan at the Gathering of Worlds. Ethan's pulse quickened. Vorin was involved. As he approached, the assassin suddenly turned and vanished into the crowd. Ethan cursed under his breath and moved quickly. He followed the figure, weaving through the guests. He had spent years as a soldier, trained for urban warfare, but this was different. One mistake, and he wouldn't get another chance. The assassin slipped through a side exit. Ethan followed. The moment he stepped through the door, he felt it. The air shifted. A blade sliced through the darkness, aimed directly at his throat. Ethan ducked, the poison dagger missing him by an inch. He countered fast, grabbing the assassin's wrist and twisting it violently. A sharp crack. The figure gasped in pain, but Ethan didn't stop. He drove his knee into the assassin's gut, forcing them back against the wall. For the first time, he saw the assassin's face. A woman, her green, reptilian eyes filled with fury. "You don't belong here, human." Ethan tightened his grip. "You're going to tell me who sent you." She laughed, even in pain. "You already know. Vorin." Before Ethan could press further, the assassin twisted free, breaking her own wrist to escape. She darted backward, pulling a small device from her sleeve. A flash of blinding light exploded in Ethan's vision. By the time he recovered, she was gone. Ethan exhaled sharply. He had survived the first attack. But this was only the beginning. As he returned to the gathering, Queen Ciliera met his gaze. "You found them?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "And I know who's behind it." The Queen's expression remained calm, but her voice turned cold. "Then it is time we finish this." Ethan clenched his fists. Vorin had made his move. Now it was Ethan's turn. The assassin had escaped, but Ethan now had something far more valuable: the truth. Chancellor Vorin was behind the attack. It wasn't surprising. The man had hated Ethan from the start. But now it was no longer just political tension. Vorin had tried to kill them, and Ethan wasn't about to let that go unanswered. The Queen's decision. Inside the Celestial Palace, Queen Ciliera sat on her throne, her violet eyes locked onto Ethan as he told her everything. When he finished, the hall fell into silence. Then the Queen spoke. "Vorin has always been ambitious." Her voice was calm, but her fingers curled slightly against the armrest of her throne. "But to order an assassination, that is treason." Ethan nodded. "We need to stop him before he tries again." The Queen exhaled slowly, considering. "If we act openly, we risk a political war. He has allies, powerful ones. We must be careful." Ethan crossed his arms. "Then let's make sure we do this right." Ciliera's eyes met his, and for a moment, a small smile touched her lips. "I knew I chose wisely." She turned to her royal guards. "Summon Vorin to the High Chamber. I will hear his defense." The guards bowed and left the room. Ethan rolled his shoulders, preparing himself. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was a battle. The confrontation. The High Chamber was filled with the most powerful figures in the Dominion. Royal advisors, noble lords, and military leaders. A circular platform sat at the center, where accused individuals were brought forward for questioning. Ethan stood beside Queen Ciliera as Chancellor Vorin entered. The Chancellor walked in confidently, dressed in his golden ceremonial robes. His expression was calm, unreadable. He didn't look like a man who had been caught. He bowed slightly. "My queen, I was told you wished to speak with me." Ciliera's voice was sharp. "Do not pretend to be ignorant, Vorin." She gestured, and one of her guards stepped forward, holding the poisoned dagger Ethan had found in his room. The Queen's eyes narrowed. This was left as a message after an attempt on Ethan Voss's life. Vorin barely glanced at it. "And what does that have to do with me?" Ethan stepped forward. "The assassin worked for the Silent Fangs. Asterisk, asterisk, his voice was steady, firm, asterisk, asterisk. And we both know who controls them. Asterisk, asterisk." A murmur spread through the chamber. The Silent Fangs were an open secret. Everyone knew they existed, but no one ever dared to speak of them. Vorin tilted his head. "That is an accusation with no proof." Ethan smirked. "Oh, but I do have proof." He turned to the doors. "Bring her in." The guard stepped aside, and a figure in a dark cloak entered, her reptilian green eyes sharp, her movements controlled. The assassin. Vorin's expression finally changed, just for a moment. A flicker of surprise. Ethan had found her after the attack, and he had convinced her to talk. The assassin stepped forward and removed her hood. Her voice was steady as she spoke. Chancellor Vorin ordered the attack on Ethan Voss. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Vorin clenched his fists, but he still tried to remain calm. A hired killer's word means nothing. Ethan wasn't done yet. He took out a small holo device and activated it. A projection appeared. Vorin speaking in a dimly lit room, giving orders to eliminate Ethan. A recording of his conversation with the assassin. The chamber erupted in chaos. Ethan turned to Vorin and smiled. "Your move, Chancellor." The fall of a chancellor. Vorin tried to speak, but he was cut off by Ciliara's sharp voice. Enough. The chamber fell silent. The queen's violet eyes burned as she rose from her throne. "You have betrayed the Dominion." Vorin finally dropped his act, his face twisted in anger. "This is madness," he shouted. "You would throw away my years of service for a mere human." Ethan stepped forward. "I'm not just a human, Vorin." His voice was low, firm. "I'm the one who beat you." The guards moved in. Vorin struggled, but it was over. He had lost. As he was dragged away, he glared at Ethan. "This is not the end." Ethan only smirked. "For you, it is. A new beginning." That night, the palace was at peace. Ethan stood on a high balcony, looking out at the stars. The Dominion had changed today. Vorin was gone, and with him, one of the biggest threats against Ethan. He heard footsteps behind him. Queen Ciliara. She stood beside him, silent for a moment. Then she spoke softly. "You have done well, Ethan." He chuckled. "I'm still alive. That's a good start." She turned to him. "More than that, you have proven yourself, not just in strength, but in wisdom. The Dominion sees you differently now." Ethan nodded. "So, what happens next?" Ciliara's lips curved slightly. "Next, you truly take your place beside me." Her eyes met his. "The game is not over, Ethan. We have won the battle. But the real war is still to come." Ethan exhaled. Of course. This was just the beginning. Vorin was gone. His betrayal had been exposed, his power stripped away. The Dominion had seen justice. But Ethan knew this was not the end. Because power never truly disappears. It only shifts. And someone somewhere was already preparing the next move. A new threat rises. The celestial palace was quieter now. But Ethan had learned something important. Silence does not mean peace. He stood in the Queen's private chamber, overlooking the vast capital city of the Dominion. Below, thousands of lights stretched across the landscape. Queen Ciliara entered, her violet robes flowing like liquid silk. "You seem restless." Ethan turned to her. "Vorin is gone, but his allies are still out there." Ciliara gave a small nod. "Indeed, many of the nobles supported him. They will not forgive us so easily." Ethan sighed. "So, what's our next move?" She stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "We strike before they do." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You have a plan." The Queen's lips curved into a slight smile. "Of course." She reached for a holo tablet and activated it. A large projection of the Dominion's political structure appeared. Several noble houses were highlighted in red. "These are the ones who supported Vorin." She pointed to a specific house. "And this is the one leading them now." Ethan narrowed his eyes. Lord Karvik, a powerful noble, once a close ally of Vorin. Now he was gathering support in the shadows. Ethan exhaled. "Then we take him down." Ciliara nodded, but not with weapons. Not yet. She gestured to another section of the hologram. "A secret meeting scheduled for tomorrow night. Karvik and his supporters are gathering to discuss their next step. If we move carefully, we can end this before it begins." Ethan smirked. "Stealth mission, then." The Queen's violet eyes gleamed. "Something like that." The Silent Mission. That night, Ethan moved through the shadows of the Dominion's capital. He wore a sleek, black infiltration suit, custom-made by the Queen's engineers. It was light, flexible, and nearly invisible in darkness. His mission: infiltrate the noble meeting, gather evidence, and expose Karvik before he could strike. Siliara had provided him with a small holo-recorder, a device capable of capturing sound and visual data from a distance. If they could record Karvik admitting to treason, it would be over for him. Ethan reached the meeting hall, a massive structure built from ancient stone, hidden within the city's lower districts. He climbed to a higher balcony, pressing himself against the cold walls. Below, a group of nobles sat around a long table, their voices low but serious. And at the head of the table, Lord Karvik. Ethan activated the holo-recorder and listened. Karvik's voice was sharp, filled with anger. The Queen has betrayed the noble houses. She places a human above her own people. Murmurs of agreement. Another noble leaned forward. But Vorin failed. If we move against the Queen, we must be certain of victory. Karvik slammed his fist on the table. Then we must act fast, before she strengthens her power. Ethan's jaw tightened. This was all the proof they needed. But then, something changed. Karvik suddenly stopped speaking. His reptilian eyes narrowed. We are being watched. Ethan barely had a second to react. The guards turned toward the balcony and raised their weapons. They had seen him. The escape. Ethan moved fast. He leaped from the balcony just as blaster shots tore through the air. He rolled as he hit the ground, dodging another shot before sprinting through the corridors. The guards chased him, their boots slamming against the stone floors. Ethan reached into his belt and grabbed a flash grenade. He tossed it over his shoulder. A burst of white light filled the hallway. The guards yelled, momentarily blinded. Ethan took the opportunity to escape through a side door, slipping into the night. He pressed a button on his wrist communicator. I have the recording. Mission complete. A familiar voice responded. Understood. Get back to the palace. Now. Ethan smirked. Already on my way. The final move. The next morning, the royal court gathered once again. But this time, it wasn't Ethan who was on trial. It was Karvik. Queen Siliara stood tall before the assembled nobles. Last night, Lord Karvik plotted against the Dominion. He conspired to overthrow the royal line. Karvik clenched his fists. Lies. The Queen's lips barely moved as she activated the holo-recorder. Karvik's own voice filled the room. We must act fast, before she strengthens her power. Silence. Then, murmurs of shock. Ethan stepped forward, arms crossed. You were saying. Karvik had no defense. The Queen's guards stepped in, surrounding him. His allies backed away, unwilling to risk themselves for a losing cause. Karvik's face twisted in rage. You will regret this, Siliara. The Queen's expression remained cold. Take him away. The guards dragged him out. It was over. The last of Vorin's supporters had fallen. The Queen's choice. That evening, Ethan once again stood beside Queen Siliara on the balcony. The city below was peaceful. He turned to her. So, what happens now? She smiled softly. Now we rebuild. Her gaze met his. And you have a choice. Ethan raised an eyebrow. A choice. She stepped closer. You have proven yourself again and again. You could return to your own people, or you could stay. Ethan took a deep breath. He had come here as an outsider, a human in an alien world. Now he was more than that. He wasn't just a fighter. He wasn't just a survivor. He was part of something bigger. He looked at Siliara and smirked. I think I'll stick around. The Queen's smile widened. Good. She turned to the stars, her voice filled with quiet strength. Because the Dominion still has many enemies, and we will face them together. Ethan exhaled, feeling a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, He was exactly where he was meant to be.